"We are giving the equity to Brent," my father said without even looking me in the eye. "Now get out, Sophia. You are fired." I stared at the ink drying on the contract in the center of the mahogany table. "So you sold my code?" I asked, my voice trembling not with sadness, but with a rage so cold it burned. My mother laughed as she adjusted her diamond brooch. "We sold our company, darling. We sold Nexus AI for $4.2 billion. The FBI agent standing in the corner would later tell me it was the biggest fraud he had ever seen. But in that moment, as my brother Brent smirked at me from the head of the table, he thought he had won. He thought he was the king of Silicon Valley. He forgot one small detail. I wrote the source code. I hold the encryption keys. And at midnight, their $4.2 billion empire turns into a pumpkin. My name is Sophia. And at 29 years old, I am the architect behind the most advanced quantum security software in the world. But to my family, I was just the help. I was the invisible hand that built their throne while they sat on it. Before I tell you how I brought down my own dynasty, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Please hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the workhorse for a family that only valued the show pony. The betrayal did not happen in a dark alley. It happened in a glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor of the Nexus AI headquarters in San Francisco. I walked in expecting a strategy meeting for our upcoming software update. I was wearing my usual black hoodie and jeans, holding a tablet with the patch notes I had spent the last 72 hours perfecting. I had not slept. I had not eaten. I had been coding to ensure our banking clients were secure. But when I opened the door, the air was different. It smelled of expensive cologne and ozone. My father Marcus was sitting at the head of the table where I usually sat. My mother Patricia was to his right, wearing a white Chanel suit that cost more than my first car. And there was Brent, my older brother, the golden child who could barely operate a microwave, let alone a server farm. He was leaning back in his chair, feet up on the table, grinning like a shark who just smelled blood. Next to him was his wife Jessica. She was sipping sparkling water and looking at me with that pitying smile she reserved for the maid or the valet driver. "Sit down, Sophia," my father said. He did not gesture to a chair. He slid a single sheet of paper across the polished wood. It stopped right at the edge of the table, dangling precariously. I picked it up. It was a termination notice, effective immediately. Reason for termination was listed as cultural incompatibility. I looked up, confused. "Is this a joke, Dad? I am the chief technical officer. I built the core. You cannot fire me for cultural incompatibility. I am the culture." My mother sighed, a long, dramatic sound that signaled she was already exhausted by my existence. "Oh, Sophia, stop being difficult. We have entered into a strategic acquisition agreement with Omnicorp. They are buying Nexus AI for $4.2 billion. It is a cash and stock deal. It is the biggest exit in the history of Black-owned tech companies. We are making history." My ears rang. $4.2 billion. They had sold the company. They had sold the proprietary algorithms I wrote in my college dorm room. They had sold the security protocols I developed while Brent was partying in Miami on the company credit card. And where do I fit into this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You do not fit," my father said coldly. Omnicorp wants a fresh start. They want a charismatic leadership team. Brent will stay on as honorary chairman. You are too technical, Sophia. You are too abrasive. You make the investors nervous with your hoodies and your technical jargon. We need polish, we need prestige." Brent chuckled. "Yeah, Soph. Look at you. You look like a hacker living in a basement. Omnicorp is a Fortune 500 company. They do not want a nerd as the face of the brand. They want visionaries." I felt the room spinning. Visionaries. Brent had failed out of business school twice. The only vision he had was spotting a VIP table at a club from across the room. "So I get nothing?" I asked, gripping the edge of the table. "I own 30% of the shares. We signed the agreement 5 years ago when we incorporated." Jessica finally spoke. Her voice was soft, melodic, and laced with venom. "Actually, Sophia, If you read the fine print of the incorporation documents your parents had, you sign those were non-voting shares that vest only upon a liquidity event, approved by the board. And since the board just voted to terminate you for cause prior to the closing of the deal, your shares are forfeited. They return to the family trust, which of course Brent and your parents control. I looked at Jessica. She was the daughter of Old Money, a family that came over on the Mayflower but lost their fortune in the 2008 crash. She needed this money. She needed this $4.2 billion to keep her social standing. She was the one whispering in Brent's ear. She was the architect of this theft. "You are stealing my life work," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "We are securing the family legacy," my mother corrected, her eyes hard. "Think of it as a contribution to the greater good. We will set up a small stipend for you. You can go back to school, learn to dress better, maybe find a husband like Jessica did." I looked around the room. There was no love here. There was no loyalty. I was a tool they had used until it was blunt, and now they were discarding me. The Omnicorp lawyers in the back of the room looked uncomfortable shifting in their suits, but they said nothing. They just wanted the code. I took a deep breath. The anger that had been rising in my chest suddenly cooled. It crystallized into something sharp and dangerous. I realized then that arguing was pointless. They did not understand what they were selling. They thought they were selling a car where you just hand over the keys and walk away. They did not realize they were selling a nuclear reactor that required a specific operator to keep it from melting down. I looked at Brent. "So you are the chairman now." "That is right, little sister. And you are handling the transition of the technology I asked." Brent waved his hand dismissively. "How hard can it be? It is just code. Control-C, Control-V. Besides, Omnicorp has their own engineers. They will figure out your spaghetti code in a week," Jessica chimed in. "We actually hired a very prestigious firm in India to handle the maintenance. They are much more affordable than you, Sophia, and they do not have an attitude problem." I looked at the termination paper again. It included a comprehensive release of liability. It stated that upon signing this, I, Sophia, waived all rights to sue for wrongful termination and accepted that I had no further claim to the company intellectual property. If I sign this, I am out, completely out. No responsibilities, no ties. "Yes," my father said, pushing a gold pen toward me. "Sign it and go. The security guards are waiting to escort you out. We do not want you causing a scene when the Omnicorp executives arrive for the champagne toast at 1 o'clock. I looked at my watch. It was 11:55 a.m. The automated server maintenance cycle was scheduled to run at 12:00 p.m. Every day at noon, the system pinged the admin user for a biometric authentication key. If it did not receive that key within 30 minutes, it initiated the lockdown protocol. It was a fail-safe I built to prevent hostile takeovers or server hijacking. If I was an employee, I would have warned them. If I was a shareholder, I would have stopped it. But they had just told me I was neither. I picked up the pen. My hand did not shake. I signed my name in fluid looping cursive. "There," I said, sliding the paper back to my father. "It is done." "Good," my mother said, not even looking at me. "Now please leave. The caterers are setting up." I stood up. I pulled my hood up over my head. I looked at Brent one last time. He was already pouring himself a glass of scotch from the sideboard. "Good luck, Brent," I said. "I hope you remember the admin password." He laughed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Who cares? Get out, Sophia. I walked out of the conference room and down the long glass corridor. I could hear them laughing behind me. I could hear Jessica asking if the caviar had arrived. I walked past the open plan office where the junior developers looked at me with sad eyes. They knew. They had seen the emails. They knew the soul of the company was walking out the door. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. I pulled out my phone. 11:58 a.m. 2 minutes until the system pinged for the admin. 2 minutes until the system integrity check began. I walked out of the building and into the bright California sunshine. I did not call an Uber. I walked 2 blocks to a park bench and sat down. I opened my laptop not to log in but to watch. I pulled up the public status page of Nexus AI. All systems operational. Green lights across the board. 11:59 a.m. My phone buzzed. It was a generic automated notification. Admin authentication required. Please verify biometric key. I swiped the notification away. 12:00 p.m. The status lights on my screen blinked once. Then they turned yellow. Warning. Admin unresponsive. I imagined the scene upstairs, the champagne corks popping, the handshakes, the wire transfer of $4.2 billion initiating between banks. 12:15 p.m. The status lights turned orange. Warning. System instability detected. License verification pending. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from a junior engineer inside. Hey Sophia, the dashboard is acting weird. It says license expired. Do you have the new key? I did not reply. I blocked the number. I was not an employee. I had signed the paper. 12:30 p.m. I watched as the status lights on the Nexus AI dashboard turned a deep, violent red. The text on the screen changed from system operational to critical failure. Lockdown initiated. At that exact moment, my phone rang. It was Brent. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. It was my father. Voicemail. Then Jessica. Voicemail. I looked up at the skyscraper I had practically lived in for the last decade. Through the glass windows of the 42nd floor, I could not see details, but I could see movement. Frantic movement. People were running. The $4.2 billion party had just ended, and the hangover was going to be legendary. The champagne was flowing in Malibu. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple that matched the decor of the victory party perfectly. My brother Brent had rented a sprawling glass mansion on the cliffs for the weekend, a place that cost $50,000 a night, to celebrate what he called the deal of the century. From where I sat in my small rented room, miles away watching the live stream on my phone, it looked like a scene from a music video. Waiters in white tuxedos circulated with trays of caviar and truffle arancini. A string quartet played pop hits near the infinity pool. And there in the center of it all was my family basking in the glow of their betrayal. My mother Patricia was holding court near the fire pit. She had changed into a shimmering gold gown that was far too young for her, but she wore it with the confidence of a woman who believes she has finally arrived. I listened as she told a circle of admiring church friends that this success was divine intervention. She said that the Lord had guided Brent's hand, and that our family was blessed to be the new royalty of Silicon Valley. She did not mention me. She did not mention the 10 years I spent hunched over a keyboard, ruining my eyesight and my posture to build the engine that was now fueling their private jet lifestyle. To her, the code was just magic that happened in the background, irrelevant now that the check had cleared. Jessica was live on Instagram, her phone held high as she spun around to show off the ocean view. She was laughing that tinkling, practiced laugh that used to make me feel small. She pulled Brent into the frame. He looked flushed, a cigar in one hand and a crystal tumbler of scotch in the other. He kissed her on the cheek and shouted to her followers that this was just the beginning. He called himself a disruptor. He said he was going to change the world. The comments section was flooding with heart emojis and people asking for loans. It was a masterclass in vanity. But while the music played in Malibu, a very different scene was unfolding 300 miles north in the server rooms of Omnicorp. I knew the schedule. I knew that at 6 o'clock sharp, the Omnicorp engineering team would attempt the first stage of the integration. They would try to migrate the Nexus AI core into their global banking infrastructure. It was a delicate procedure like a heart transplant. And they were about to discover that the heart they had bought was missing a beat. I imagined the scene, the hum of the cooling fans, the nervous energy of the junior developers, the lead engineer typing in the command to initiate the merge. They would expect a seamless transition. They would expect the green status lights to ripple across their monitors like a wave. Instead, at 6:05 p.m., the first warning siren would have sounded. Back in Malibu, the party was reaching its peak. Brent clinked his glass with a spoon, demanding silence. The crowd hushed, turning their eager faces toward him. He stood on a raised platform by the pool, looking out over the ocean with a look of supreme self-satisfaction. "I just want to say," Brent began, his voice booming, "that today proves that vision is everything. Some people get bogged down in the details. They get stuck in the weeds. But true leadership is about seeing the big picture. It is about knowing when to make the hard choices. And we made the right choice. Nexus AI is the future, and the future belongs to us." The crowd cheered. My father clapped harder than anyone, beaming with pride at the son who had never worked a real day in his life. At that exact moment, across the state, the screens in the Omnicorp control room went black. A collective gasp would have gone through the room. Then a single line of text appeared in jagged red pixelated font. "Unauthorized user. License revoked by owner Sophia Labs." The Omnicorp engineers would have panicked. They would have tried to bypass it. They would have tried to reboot. But I had written the kernel myself. It was designed to detect tampering. When they tried to force the integration without my biometric key, the system did exactly what I programmed it to do. It assumed it was under attack. It initiated the Scorched Earth protocol. The red text on their screens would have started a countdown. "Data encryption in progress. Access denied." In Malibu, the music was still playing, but the vibe shifted when Brent's phone started to ring. It was not a normal ring. It was the special urgent tone he had assigned to the VIP contacts. He pulled it out of his pocket and looked at the screen. His grin widened. "It is Sterling," he announced to the crowd, referring to the CEO of Omnicorp. "He is probably calling to congratulate me personally on the closing." The crowd murmured in appreciation. This was the ultimate flex. A personal call from one of the most powerful men in tech. "Put it on speaker," Jessica squealed, clapping her hands. Let everyone hear. Brent, drunk on his own ego, did not hesitate. He tapped the speaker icon and held the phone up like a trophy. "Mr. Sterling," Brent said smoothly, "I assume you are calling to tell me the integration is going smoothly. We are just having a little celebration here in Malibu." There was a pause. A silence so heavy it seemed to suck the air out of the party. Then a voice exploded from the phone speakers. It was not a congratulatory voice. It was a guttural roar of pure, unadulterated rage that echoed off the glass walls of the mansion. "You idiot!" Sterling screamed. The sound was distorted by the volume, making it sound even more terrifying. "You sold me a brick?" Brent's smile faltered. "Excuse me, do not play dumb with me." "You fraud?" Sterling yelled, his voice shaking with fury. "My entire engineering team is locked out. The system is displaying a license revocation notice from a Sophia Labs." "Who the hell is Sophia Labs?" The name hung in the air like a curse. I saw my mother's face go pale beneath her makeup. I saw my father drop his champagne flute. It shattered on the patio, but no one looked down. Brent stammered, holding the phone with both hands now as if it were a live grenade. That is just a glitch. Sophia is my sister. She was a low-level employee. We fired her this morning. She must be playing a prank." "A prank?" Sterling roared. "This is not a prank. This is a global banking crisis. The software has initiated a lockdown. It has encrypted the interface. It is asking for a biometric admin key that you assured me was transferred with the sale. You told me you owned the intellectual property." "We do," Brent insisted, his voice cracking. "We own everything. My parents signed the papers." "I am looking at the error log right now," Sterling shouted, cutting him off. "The system kernel is registered to a limited liability company, not Nexus AI. You sold me a license, not the code. And that license just expired because you fired the administrator." The guests were whispering now. People were stepping back, creating a circle of isolation around my family. The illusion of the Golden Dynasty was cracking in real time. "Fix it," Sterling demanded. "Get your sister on the phone. Get the key. or I swear to God I will have the FBI at your front door before the ice in your drink melts." The line went dead. The silence that followed was absolute. The string quartet had stopped playing. The ocean waves crashed below, sounding suddenly ominous. Brent stood there, the phone still held up in the air, his face a mask of confusion and terror. Jessica was the first to move. She rushed over to him, grabbing his arm. "What did he mean? What did he mean? Sophia owns it. You said she was just the help. I thought she was—" Brent whispered. My mother marched up to them, her composure shattering. "Fix this, Brent. Call her. Tell her to stop this nonsense right now. She is ruining everything." Brent fumbled with his phone. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped it once before picking it up. He dialed my number. I watched the screen of my phone light up. Big Brother was calling. I let it ring. 1, 2, 3. In the video, I saw Brent pacing, sweating. "Pick up, pick up, pick up," he muttered. I let it go to voicemail. He called again, then my father called, then Jessica. I silenced my phone and leaned back on the park bench. The sun had fully set now and the air was getting cool. I pulled my hoodie tighter around me. They were just beginning to understand the magnitude of their mistake. They thought they could erase me. They thought they could extract the value of my mind and discard the person who carried it. Back at the party, the guests were leaving. No one wanted to be associated with a fraud. The waiters were packing up the food. The dream was dissolving. I stood up. I had a long night ahead of me. I knew what would happen next. They would try to bully me. Then they would try to sue me. And finally, when they realized they had no leverage, they would try to manipulate me with love. But I was ready. I checked my bank account on my phone. The severance pay they had wired me was there. 2 weeks of salary. A pittance. I transferred it all to a new secure account. Then I opened my email and sent one single document to the General Counsel of Omnicorp. It was the original employment contract I had signed 5 years ago, the one my parents had barely read because they were too busy planning their first vacation with the company profits. I highlighted the clause in Section 4, Paragraph 2. Intellectual property retention. All source code created by Sophia Jefferson remains the sole property of Sophia Labs, LLC. Nexus AI is granted a revocable non-exclusive license for usage contingent upon the continued employment of the creator. I hit send. The war had officially begun. And for the first time in my life, I was not fighting to be seen. I was fighting to win. The silence from my end was driving them insane. I knew my brother Brent better than anyone. I knew that silence to him felt like an insult. He was used to me arguing, used to me pleading for them to listen to logic. My silence meant I was no longer playing their game, and that terrified him. So true to form, he decided that if I would not answer the phone, he would force me to answer the door. An hour after the disastrous call with the CEO of Omnicorp, Brent's Aston Martin screeched into the parking lot of my apartment complex in downtown San Francisco. It was a modest building, nothing like the glass towers he preferred. I had lived there for 5 years, keeping my overhead low, while I reinvested every spare dollar into my private servers. He did not come alone. Through the security feed I was monitoring from my new location, I saw him storming toward the lobby entrance. He had brought Jessica, who looked furious, still wearing her party dress, and 2 large men in suits, who I recognized as private security from the event. He bypassed the intercom. He simply waited for a neighbor to exit and shoved his way through the door, marching down the hallway to apartment 4B. I watched on my screen as he pounded on my door. "Open up, Sophia," he shouted, his voice echoing in the empty hallway. "Open up, or I will have these gentlemen break this door down. You are going to fix this glitch right now, and then you are going to apologize to Sterling." He waited. No answer. He pounded again, harder this time. Jessica was behind him, checking her phone, likely deleting negative comments from her social media. She looked up and said, "Just break it down, Brent. She is probably inside hiding like a coward." Brent nodded to the security guards. One of them stepped forward and kicked the lock. It was a cheap door, It gave way with a splintering crash. They rushed in ready to drag me out by my hair if necessary, but they froze. The apartment was empty. And I do not just mean I was not there. I mean the apartment was a shell. The furniture was gone. The bookshelves were bare. The closet doors were open, revealing nothing but wire hangers. Even the refrigerator was empty, and unplugged, the door propped open to prevent mold. There were no pictures on the walls, no rugs on the floors. The only thing left in the center of the living room was a small folding plastic chair with a single sheet of paper taped to the back of it. I had moved out 48 hours before the board meeting. I knew the numbers. I knew they were shopping the company around. I knew that once the deal was signed, I would be a liability. So I had packed my life into a storage unit and moved to a short-term rental in Oakland that was registered under a shell corporation. On the video feed, I saw Brent spin around in a circle, confused. "Where is she?" he yelled. "Where is her stuff?" Jessica walked into the kitchen, opening cabinets and slamming them shut. "She cleared it out," she hissed. She knew. She planned this. This was the moment the narrative shifted for them. Up until now, they thought I was reacting emotionally to being fired. They thought this was a tantrum. Now, standing in that hollowed-out apartment, they began to realize that this was not a reaction. It was a preemptive strike. Brent pulled out his phone again. He did not call me. He called our mother. "Mom, she is gone," he said, his voice rising in panic. "The place is empty." No, she did not just leave for the night. She moved out. She took everything. The servers, her computers, everything. I could not hear what my mother said on the other end, but I did not have to wait long to find out. 5 minutes later, my phone began to vibrate with a call from Patricia Jefferson. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again. And again. When she finally stopped, I put on my headphones and played the messages. Her voice was not the polished church-going matriarch voice she used in public. It was the voice she reserved for me when no one else was looking. The voice of raw, unfiltered disappointment. "Sophia, this is your mother." The first message began. "I do not know what kind of sick game you are playing, but it ends now. You are embarrassing this family. You are humiliating your brother on the biggest night of his life. We gave you a job when no one else would hire a college dropout. We put clothes on your back. And this is how you repay us. By sabotaging the company. You are ungrateful. You have always been jealous of Brent ever since you were children. Fix the system, Sophia, or so help me God, I will ensure you never work in this industry again." The second message was softer, more manipulative. "Sophia, it is Mom again. Look, I know you are hurt. I know we should have told you about the sale sooner. But we did it for you. We wanted to secure your future. Brent wants to share the money with you, but he cannot do that if the deal falls through. Just turn the servers back on, honey. Come home. We can talk about this. We are family. You do not turn your back on family." I listened to the messages twice. The first one was anger. The second one was desperation. They still did not get it. They thought I wanted money. They thought I wanted an apology. They did not understand that I simply wanted what was mine. I sat at the desk in my temporary office, surrounded by the humming of my private server racks. The Omnicorp system was still down. The global banking integration was halted. The news cycle was starting to pick up the story. Tech blogs were already speculating about a massive failure at Nexus AI. It was time to clarify the situation. Not with words, but with documentation. I opened my email client. I composed a new message addressed to Brent, my parents Jessica, and CC'd the legal team of Omnicorp. The subject line was simple: Notice of intellectual property violation. I did not write a long emotional letter. I did not explain my feelings. I simply attached a PDF file. It was the employment agreement I had signed 5 years ago, back when Nexus AI was just a startup operating out of my parents' garage. Back then, my father was so obsessed with protecting the company from lawsuits that he insisted I work as an independent contractor through my own LLC, Sophia Labs. He wanted to make sure that if I wrote bad code and we got sued, the family assets would be safe. He thought he was being clever. He thought he was insulating the family from my potential failure. He had never imagined that he was actually insulating my success from the family. In the email, I highlighted Section 14, Paragraph B in bright red. Intellectual property ownership. All code algorithms, architectural structures, and software solutions created by the contractor. Sophia Labs, LLC, shall remain the sole and exclusive property of the contractor. The company Nexus AI is granted a limited, non-exclusive, revocable license to use said software contingent upon the active employment of the contractor. Upon termination of this agreement for any reason, said license is immediately revoked, and all proprietary code must be purged from company servers. I typed a short message in the body of the email. Dear former employers, per the terms of my termination which you signed this morning, my employment has ended. Therefore, per the attached agreement, your license to use the Sophia Labs core architecture has expired effective 12:30 p.m. today. Any attempt to bypass the security lockout to access my property will be considered a violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Please cease and desist all unauthorized use of my software immediately. Regards, Sophia. I hit send. I imagined the notification popping up on Brent's phone as he stood in my empty living room. I imagined the Omnicorp lawyers reading it in their high-rise offices in New York, their faces draining of color as they realized the due diligence team had missed the most important document in the data room. My family thought they had fired an employee. They were about to learn they had just fired the landlord of their own digital existence. And I had just changed the locks. The atmosphere in the mahogany-paneled conference room of Henderson and Associates was thick enough to choke on. 24 hours ago, this room would have smelled of expensive coffee and self-congratulation. Now it smelled of stale sweat and panic. My family sat on one side of the long table looking like monarchs in exile. My father Marcus was pale, his hands gripping the leather armrests of his chair so tightly his knuckles were white. My mother, Patricia, was nervously twisting her wedding ring, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an exit. And Brent, my brother, the so-called CEO, looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for a spanking. Across from them sat Mr. Henderson, the family's longtime attorney. He was a man who usually exuded the confidence of someone who charged $1,000 an hour. Today, however, he looked like a man facing a firing squad. He had loosened his tie. There were beads of perspiration glistening on his forehead. He had a stack of documents in front of him, but he was not reading them. He was staring at them as if they were a death sentence. So Brent said, breaking the silence with a voice that tried to be authoritative but cracked in the middle, "Just tell us how long it will take to get the injunction. We need to force her to turn the servers back on. Omnicorp is threatening to pull the wire transfer." Henderson took a deep breath. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked tired. He looked defeated. "There will be no injunction, Brent," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" Jessica snapped. She was sitting next to Brent, her posture rigid. Her perfect blowout was starting to frizzy, a sign of her inner turmoil. "She is sabotaging the company. She is holding our property hostage. That is illegal." Henderson looked up, meeting Jessica's eyes with a grim expression. "That is just the problem, Mrs. Jefferson. It is not your property." My father slammed his hand on the table. "We own Nexus AI. We own 100% of the stock. Sophia was just an employee." Henderson slid a single document across the table. It was the same PDF I had emailed them an hour ago. The employment agreement from 5 years ago. "You own the company," Marcus Henderson said, his voice trembling slightly. "You own the brand. You own the office lease. You own the furniture. But you do not own the product. When you set this up, you insisted on insulating the family assets from liability. You wanted Sophia to take all the risk. So we created Sophia Labs, LLC. We made her the sole proprietor of the intellectual property. Nexus AI does not own the code. You have been leasing it from her. And the lease has a termination clause." He pointed to the paragraph I had highlighted in red. Clause 14b. Upon termination of the contractor, the license is immediately revoked. The room went silent. It was the kind of silence that precedes an explosion. Brent stared at the paper. But we can argue that she signed it under duress, or that it was implied ownership. Henderson shook his head slowly. No, Brent, we cannot. Because you fired her. You signed a termination letter that explicitly stated you were severing all ties. You triggered the clause yourself. Legally, she is within her rights. In fact, if we try to force access to her servers, she can sue us for corporate espionage, and she will win. My mother made a sound like a wounded animal. But the money, she whispered. The $4.2 billion, we already spent the advance. We put deposits on the houses. We paid off the debts. Henderson looked down at his hands. If you cannot deliver the working code to Omnicorp by close of business tomorrow, the deal is void. And worse, Omnicorp will likely sue you for fraud. They will say you sold them something you did not own. That is securities fraud. That is federal prison time. The words hung in the air. Federal prison time. This was the moment the reality finally pierced through their delusion. They were not just poor, they were criminals. Brent put his head in his hands. This cannot be happening. She is my sister. She would not do this to me. That was when Jessica moved. It happened so fast that at first no one reacted. Jessica stood up her chair, scraping loudly against the floor. She turned to Brent. Her face, usually a mask of bored elegance, was twisted into a snarl of pure, unfiltered hatred. "You idiot!" she screamed. She swung her hand and slapped him. It was a hard, vicious slap that echoed in the quiet room. Brent's head snapped to the side. He looked up at her, shocked, holding his cheek. "Jessica," he stammered. "Shut up," she hissed. "You useless, incompetent parasite. You told me you read the contracts. You told me you handled it. I married you because you said you were going to be a titan of industry, and now you tell me you are going to prison." She turned to the lawyer, ignoring her husband. "Is there any loophole? Any way to claim the contract is invalid?" Henderson shook his head. "Not unless Sophia voluntarily signs a new agreement transferring the IP. She holds all the cards." Jessica stood there, breathing hard. Her chest heaved. I could see the gears turning in her mind. She was a survivor. Her family had lost their fortune once, and she had vowed never to be poor again. She looked at Brent, who was weeping silently. She looked at my father, who was staring at the wall in catatonic shock. Then she looked at my mother. "Patricia," Jessica said, her voice suddenly dropped dead calm. It was terrifying how quickly she switched gears. The rage vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating pragmatism. My mother looked up, tears streaming down her face. "What? What do we do?" Jessica walked over to her. She placed a hand on my mother's shoulder. "The law cannot help us. The contract is ironclad. If we fight her in court, we lose and we go to jail. So we do not fight her in court." My mother sniffled. "Then what do we do?" "We fight her with the only weapon she has no defense against," Jessica said softly. "We use guilt." She pulled a chair close to my mother. "Listen to me. Sophia has always been desperate for your approval. She spent her whole life trying to get you to look at her the way you look at Brent. That is why she built this company, not for money, for you." My mother nodded slowly, listening. "Right now she is angry," Jessica continued. "She feels rejected, but deep down she is still that little girl waiting for mommy to say she is proud of her. We need to give her that. But she hates us," Brent whimpered from his side of the table. "She does not hate you," Jessica snapped without looking at him. "She is hurt. There is a difference. And hurt people can be manipulated." She turned back to my mother. "Patricia, you need to give the performance of a lifetime. You need to go to her, not as a business partner, not as a boss, but as a broken-hearted mother. You need to cry. You need to beg. You need to tell her that this stress is killing you. Tell her your heart condition is acting up. Tell her whatever you have to tell her to get her to sign that transfer document." My mother wiped her face. She sat up straighter. The panic in her eyes began to fade, replaced by a glimmer of hope. She had always been a master of emotional theater. She knew how to weaponize her tears. "I can do that," my mother said, her voice strengthening. She has always been soft. She never could stand to see me cry. "Good," Jessica said. "Mr. Henderson, draw up a transfer of ownership agreement. Keep it short. 1 page. Make it look like a formality. Patricia, you take it to her. Find out where she is hiding. Go alone. Wear something old. Do not wear the Chanel. Look frail." I watched all of this through the security camera I had tapped into in the lawyer's office hours ago. It was easy. Their password was password 123. I watched my mother stand up. I watched her walk to the bathroom attached to the conference room. When she came out 5 minutes later, she was transformed. She had washed off her makeup. She had taken off her diamond earrings and put them in her purse. She had even messed up her hair slightly, pulling a few strands loose to frame her face. She slumped her shoulders. She no longer looked like the arrogant matriarch who had fired me that morning. She looked like a fragile, elderly woman who had the weight of the world on her shoulders. She looked at Jessica. "How do I look?" Jessica nodded, a shark-like smile spreading across her face. "You look like a victim." "It is perfect." My father spoke up for the first time. "Do you think it will work?" "It has to," Jessica said. "Because if it does not, we are all finished." My mother took the document from the lawyer. She folded it and put it in her purse. "I am going to save this family," she said. I sat in my dark office staring at the screen. A chill went down my spine. I had expected them to send police. I had expected them to send lawyers. I was ready for a fight, but I was not sure if I was ready for this. I watched my mother practice her crying face in the reflection of the glass window. She squeezed her eyes shut, and when she opened them, they were wet with fresh tears. It was terrifying. It was impressive. They were coming for me, and they were bringing the one weapon I had never learned to build a firewall against: a mother's love, even if it was fake. I found a corner table at a small coffee shop in Oakland, far away from the polished glass facades of Silicon Valley. I chose it because it was dark, loud, and anonymous. I had my hood up, my laptop open, and a cup of black coffee cooling next to my hand. I was monitoring the Omnicorp stock price, which had been in freefall for the last 4 hours. It was a grim satisfaction watching the red line dip lower and lower, knowing that every tick downward was a direct result of my family's greed. But anonymity, I soon learned, is a luxury that costs more than I could afford. My mother had hired a private investigator. They had tracked my phone or maybe my license plate. It did not matter how they found me. What mattered was that at 2:00 p.m. the bell above the door chimed, and Patricia Jefferson walked in. I almost did not recognize her. The woman who raised me would never be caught dead in anything less than St. John knits and pearls. But this woman was wearing a faded gray cardigan and flat shoes. Her hair, usually sprayed into an immovable helmet of perfection, was loose and slightly frizzy. She looked frail. She looked like a grandmother who had lost her way. It was a brilliant costume. Jessica had coached her well. She scanned the room, her eyes locking onto me instantly. There was no hesitation. She walked straight to my table, but she did not storm over. She shuffled. She let her shoulders slump. By the time she reached me, half the coffee shop was already looking at her with concern. "Sophia," she breathed, her voice cracking perfectly. "Oh, thank God. I have been so worried about you." I did not close my laptop. I did not stand up. I simply took a sip of my coffee and watched the performance. "Hello, Mother. You can drop the act. There are no investors here." She ignored my comment. She pulled out the chair opposite me and collapsed into it, grabbing my hand across the table. Her skin was cold. I pulled my hand away. "Baby, please," she said loud enough for the table next to us to hear. "Please come home. Your father is sick. He is so worried about you he cannot eat. Why are you doing this to us? Why are you trying to destroy your own family?" The barista paused mid-pour. The couple at the next table stopped talking. Phones started to come out. This was exactly what she wanted. A public scene. A narrative where I was the villainous, ungrateful daughter abandoning her elderly parents. I lowered my voice. Stop it. I am not destroying anything. I am just enforcing the contract you signed. You fired me, remember? My mother began to cry. Huge wet tears rolled down her cheeks. We were under so much pressure, Sophia. We made a mistake. But you are ruining your brother's life. He is going to go to prison. Do you want that? Do you want to see your big brother in a cage? I looked at her, really looked at her. For 30 years I had craved this woman's attention. I had won science fairs, coding competitions, and scholarships, all hoping to see a spark of pride in her eyes. But the only time her eyes lit up was when Brent managed to tie his own shoes. I leaned forward. Do you remember when I was 12 years old, Mom? She blinked, confused by the sudden shift. What, Sophia? Focus. We are talking about the deal. No, I said, keeping my voice steady but hard as steel. We are talking about sacrifice. Do you remember the Westinghouse Science Talent Search? I won first place in the state. The prize was a $50,000 scholarship bond. It was supposed to pay for my tuition at MIT. My mother stiffened. Her tears paused. Why are you bringing up ancient history? Because I never saw that money. I continued. I went to the bank the day I got accepted to college and the account was empty. You and Dad had cashed it out. And the next day, Brent pulled into the driveway in a brand new Mustang. The coffee shop was silent now. People were openly recording. My mother's face flushed. It was not shame, it was anger. Brent needed reliable transportation for his auditions, she hissed, her voice, dropping the frail grandmother act for a split second. He was trying to make something of himself. You were smart. We knew you could get another scholarship. We knew you would figure it out. You always figure it out. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. That is, it isn't it? You punish competence. You saw that I could survive, so you decided I did not need protecting. You fed me to the wolves so you could keep Brent warm in his fur coat. Well, guess what, Mother? I survived the wolves, and now I am leading the pack. She stood up, her chair scraping violently against the floor. The frail act was slipping. The real Patricia was fighting to get out. You selfish little girl. We gave you life. We put a roof over your head, and now you are holding us hostage over some computer code. It is just typing, Sophia. It is not real work. Brent is a CEO. He builds relationships. He has a future. You are just a mechanic. There it was, the truth. The people recording on their phones gasped. The cruelty was so naked, so raw that it sucked the air out of the room. I stood up too. I was taller than her now. I was not the 12-year-old girl crying over a stolen scholarship anymore. The price of the mechanic just went up, I said. And by the way, that car you bought him, he crashed it 3 weeks later while driving drunk. You covered that up too. You have spent your whole life cleaning up his messes with my money. But this mess, this $4.2 billion mess, this one is on the house. My mother looked around the room. She realized she had lost the audience. The poor mother narrative had crumbled the moment she minimized my career and justified stealing my childhood money. Her face twisted into a mask of pure venom. You will regret this, she spat. You will die alone, Sophia. No man will ever want a woman who destroys her own blood. I picked up my phone. It had been propped up against my coffee cup the entire time, the camera lens facing her. Actually, I said, tapping the screen. I think the internet disagrees. I have been live streaming this conversation to my Twitch channel for the last 10 minutes. There are 14,000 people watching right now. And looking at the chat, they do not think I am the one who is going to die alone. My mother's face went white. She looked at the phone, then at me, then at the patrons holding up their own devices. The realization hit her like a physical blow. This was not just a private argument. This was a public execution of her reputation. She grabbed her purse. She did not say another word. She turned and ran out of the coffee shop, stumbling in her flat shoes, pushing past a waiter who dropped a tray of glasses. I watched her go. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. It did not feel good. It did not feel like victory. It felt like cutting off a gangrenous limb. It hurt, but I knew it was the only way to survive. I looked down at my phone. The chat was moving so fast it was a blur of support. Run, girl, run. That mom is toxic. Justice for Sophia. I ended the stream. I closed my laptop. I left a $20 bill on the table for the coffee I barely touched. As I walked out into the cool Oakland afternoon, I knew two things. First, my mother would never forgive me for exposing her. And second, Jessica would not make the same mistake. My mother had tried emotional manipulation and failed. Jessica would try something much more tangible. She would try to destroy me professionally. My phone buzzed. It was an alert from my server monitoring system. Someone was attempting a brute force attack on the firewall. The IP address was tracing back to a boutique hacking firm in Russia. Jessica was not wasting any time. The emotional warfare was over. The digital siege had begun. The digital siege from Russia was annoying, but it was nothing I could not handle. I routed the traffic into a honeypot server, let the hackers think they were making progress, and then flooded their systems with a terabyte of junk data that would take them weeks to sift through. That was the easy part. The hard part was the text message I received at 4:00 p.m. It was from Jessica. It did not contain a threat or a plea. It simply listed an address: the Rosewood Sand Hill, the most exclusive hotel in Silicon Valley, where venture capitalists decided which startups lived and which died over $20 cocktails. I knew why she chose it. It was her turf. It was a place where money whispered and power was measured by who you knew, not what you built. She wanted me to feel out of place. She wanted to remind me of the hierarchy. I put on a clean blazer over my hoodie, not to blend in but to show I was ready for business. When I arrived, the hostess looked at my sneakers with disdain, but led me to a private booth in the back. Jessica was already there. She was sipping a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, looking every inch the aristocrat. She was wearing a white power suit that cost more than my first server rack. She did not stand up. She did not smile. She simply gestured to the empty seat across from her. "You are late," she said, checking a diamond-encrusted watch. I sat down. I did not order a drink. "I have been busy fighting off the hackers you hired, Jessica." She waved a hand dismissively. "I do not know what you are talking about. I am just a concerned sister-in-law trying to mediate a family crisis." "Cut the act," I said, leaning back. Mom tried the emotional route. It failed. Now here you are. Let me guess. You are going to try to bribe me, or maybe threaten to sue me. Jessica laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Sue you? No. That takes too long. And bribe you? Please. We both know you have too much pride for that. No, Sophia. I am here to give you a reality check. She leaned forward, her blue eyes locking onto mine. You are a talented coder, Sophia. I will give you that. But you are naive. You think this is about rights and contracts. You think because you are right, you are going to win. But look around you. She gestured to the room filled with wealthy, mostly white men in suits. This is the real world, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. And in this world, reputation is everything. My family has been in this country since the revolution. My father plays golf with senators. My uncle sits on the board of 3 major tech conglomerates. I stayed silent, letting her play her hand. She took a sip of wine. You are a black woman in the tech industry, Sophia. You know how hard you had to work just to get your foot in the door. You know how quickly that door can slam shut. If you persist in this, if you embarrass my husband and ruin this deal, I will make it my personal mission to ensure you never work again. She paused to let the threat sink in. I will make a few phone calls, she continued. I will label you as difficult, unstable, a liability. I will have you blacklisted from every major firm from here to New York. You will not be able to get a job fixing printers at a library, let alone architecting security systems. You will be erased. It was a good speech. It was designed to trigger every insecurity I had ever felt as a minority in a field dominated by people who looked like her. She was weaponizing her privilege, sharpening it into a blade and holding it to my throat. I looked at her. I looked at the confidence radiating off her. She really believed she held the power. She really believed that her last name was a shield that could protect her from math. "Are you finished?" I asked calmly. Jessica raised an eyebrow. "I am waiting for you to sign the transfer papers." I reached into my bag. Jessica smiled, thinking I was reaching for a pen. Instead, I pulled out a folder. It was not thick. It contained just 3 sheets of paper. I slid it across the table. "What is this?" she asked, looking down with distaste. "Open it," I said. She flipped open the folder. I watched her eyes scan the first page. It was a credit report, but not mine. The smile fell from her face. "This is private financial information," she hissed. "How did you get this?" "I am a data architect, Jessica," I said. "Information is what I do. And what that document shows is that the illustrious Harrington family is not just broke. You are drowning." I pointed to the second page. "Your parents just took out a third mortgage on the Hamptons estate, and they were rejected. The bank is moving to foreclose next month. And your father, the one who plays golf with senators, he is currently under investigation by the IRS for tax evasion. He is not going to be making any phone calls for you. He is going to be asking you for bail money." Jessica's hand shook as she turned to the third page. It was a foreclosure notice for her and Brent's penthouse. "You see," I continued, my voice low and steady, "I know why you pushed for this sale. I know why you married my brother. You are $50 million in debt, Jessica. You are not old money. You are just old debt wrapped in designer clothes." Jessica slammed the folder shut. She looked around to see if anyone had heard. Her face was pale, the makeup standing out starkly against her skin. "You are lying," she whispered. "This is illegal." "It is public record if you know where to look," I said. "You needed that for $2 billion payout to save your parents and yourself. You looked at my family and you saw a piggy bank. You saw Brent as a useful idiot, and you saw me as an obstacle." I leaned in closer. "You threatened to blacklist me. You threatened to call your powerful friends. Go ahead. Call them. Tell them that your sister-in-law is the one holding the encryption keys to the global banking infrastructure. Tell them that if I do not type in a code every 12 hours, the assets of half the Fortune 500 companies freeze." I took a sip of water. "I do not need a job, Jessica. I do not need your network. Because right now I am not an employee. I am the bank. And you are just a desperate woman trying to keep her house of cards from falling down." Jessica stared at me. For the first time I saw fear in her eyes. Real naked fear. The power dynamic had shifted so violently she had whiplash. She realized that her threats were empty because she had nothing left to leverage. Her privilege had just been voided by my leverage. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice trembling. I stood up. I straightened my blazer. "I want you to go home," I said. "I want you to tell my brother that his wife is a fraud. I want you to tell my parents that their golden ticket just bounced. And I want you to know that when the FBI comes knocking, and they will come knocking, I will not be the one opening the door for them." I dropped a $20 bill on the table. "Buy yourself another drink, Jessica. You are going to need it." I walked out of the rosewood sandhill without looking back. I could feel her eyes burning into my back, but I did not care. I had just dismantled her entire identity in 5 minutes. But as I stepped out into the cool evening air, I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was an alert, not from my servers, from the news. CNN was breaking a story. "Global banking crisis imminent. Nexus AI sale under investigation." The clock was ticking, and the explosion was about to begin. The sun rose over Silicon Valley, but for Omnicorp and my family, It was the darkest day in history. 24 hours had passed since the lockdown initiated. Without my biometric key to release the daily security patch, the Sophia Labs kernel had gone into full defensive mode. It treated every external request as a threat. ATMs in London were eating cards. Point-of-sale terminals in Tokyo were rejecting payments. And on Wall Street, the ticker for Omnicorp was bleeding red ink so fast it looked like a crime scene. I sat in my temporary office watching the cable news split screens. On the left was the chaos at the banks. On the right was a live aerial shot of my brother's mansion in Malibu. The headline was no longer about the acquisition. It read, "The $4.2 billion ghost ship." The pundits were not holding back. They were asking the question I had warned them about. How did a company buy a security firm without securing the rights to the code? The stock had plummeted 30% in pre-market trading. Billions of dollars in market cap vanished overnight. My phone pinged with alerts not from my family, but from industry contacts. Class action lawsuits were being filed by the minute. Pension funds that had invested in the deal were suing for fraud. The Securities and Exchange Commission had announced a formal probe. The legal term being thrown around was material misrepresentation. In plain English, it meant my brother and parents had sold a car they did not have the pink slip for. Through the internal security cameras I still had access to because Brent never bothered to change the default passwords on his smart home system, I watched the collapse of the Jefferson dynasty from the inside. The mansion was under siege, not by police looking to arrest them not yet, but by a mob of angry shareholders and news vans camped at the gate. Inside, the golden child was crumbling. Brent had locked himself in the master bathroom. Through the camera feed in the hallway, I could hear him. He was not making calls to fix the problem. He was not strategizing with lawyers. He was screaming. I switched to the audio feed. "Open the door, Brent." That was Jessica. Her voice was shrill, stripping away any pretense of the sophisticated socialite. "The lawyers are on the phone. You have to make a statement. You have to tell them it is a technical error." I heard the sound of glass shattering against the bathroom tile. Probably a cologne bottle. "Go away, Jessica. This is your fault. You made me sell. You said Sophia was a nobody. You said she would just roll over. You said we would be billionaires. I am trying to save us, you idiot." Jessica screamed back, banging on the mahogany door. "Stop drinking and come out here. The police are outside." "The police." That was the detail that made the moment surreal. I looked at the external cameras. The LAPD had arrived in riot gear to form a perimeter around the estate. They were setting up barricades to hold back the growing crowd of reporters and angry investors who had driven up the coast to demand answers. The flashing blue and red lights washed over the white facade of the house, giving it the look of a crime scene long before any handcuffs were actually brought out. My parents were downstairs in the living room, sitting in the dark with the curtains drawn. My mother, Patricia, was holding her rosary beads, but she was not praying. She was staring at the television, watching a reporter interview a former Nexus AI employee who was describing exactly how little Brent actually contributed to the company. "He could not code 'Hello World,'" the engineer said on live TV. My father just stared at his hands, the hands that had signed the termination letter. They looked paralyzed. For the first time in their lives, they were facing a problem that could not be solved by their reputation or their church connections. Back upstairs, the bathroom door finally clicked open. Brent stumbled out. He looked like a wreck. His shirt was unbuttoned, his eyes were bloodshot, and he reeked of expensive vodka. He looked at Jessica, not with love, but with pure venom. "You want a statement?" he slurred. "I will give you a statement. I am going to tell them the truth. I am going to tell them you orchestrated the whole thing." Jessica's face went cold. "You will do no such thing. If I go down, Brent, I am taking you with me. I know about the offshore accounts. I know about the gambling debts you paid off with the company credit card last year. You think Sophia is the only one who kept receipts? I watched them turn on each other like rats in a sinking ship." It was fascinating. The love and loyalty they preached about at every family gathering had evaporated the moment the money stopped flowing. They were not a family. They were a cartel, and the business was failing. My phone buzzed again. It was a notification from the Omnicorp legal team. They were requesting an emergency meeting not with Brent, but with me. They had finally realized who actually held the power. But I was not ready to talk yet. I wanted the stock to drop another 10 points. I wanted the desperation to be absolute. I looked back at the screen. Brent had collapsed onto the hallway floor, weeping into his hands. Jessica was standing over him, looking at her phone, frantically checking her own bank accounts, likely realizing that her assets were already being frozen by the impending lawsuits. The chaos outside was getting louder. Someone threw a rock over the gate, smashing the windshield of Brent's Aston Martin. The police moved in to push the crowd back. It was a perfect tragedy. And the best part was, I did not have to lift a finger. I just had to sit back, drink my coffee, and let the truth do its work. They had built their castle on sand, and now the tide was coming in. Dưới đây là nội dung phần 8 của kịch bản được viết tiếp nối mạch truyền, đảm bảo độ dài và văn phong thân thiện với dòng đọc AI, không chưa kỳ to là diễn biến liên tục. The raid happened at exactly 5 in the morning, just as the fog was lifting off the Pacific Ocean. I was awake, sitting in my command center with a mug of herbal tea, watching the monitors. I knew it was coming because I had seen the warrant hit the federal database 10 minutes prior. My family, however, was sleeping the deep, dreamless sleep of the delusional. They thought the worst was over. They thought the angry mob at the gate was their biggest problem. They were wrong. The silence of the Malibu morning was shattered not by a doorbell, but by the mechanical roar of a battering ram taking the front gates off their hinges. Through the high-definition security cameras that Brent had paid $50,000 for, I watched a convoy of black SUVs swarm the driveway like a colony of aggressive ants. These were not the local police who had been politely guarding the perimeter yesterday. These vehicles had no markings, but the men jumping out of them wore navy blue windbreakers with 3 bright yellow letters emblazoned on the back. FBI. I turned up the volume on the internal microphones. The sound of the front door being breached was sickeningly loud, a crack of splintering wood that echoed through the cavernous marble foyer. Federal agents' voice boomed deep and authoritative. Search warrant. Everyone show me your hands. Do it now. Upstairs in the master suite, I saw Brent bolt upright in bed. He looked disoriented, his hair sticking up in every direction. He grabbed his silk robe, stumbling over the empty bottles of vodka scattered on the floor. For a split second, the idiot actually thought they were there to help him. I heard him yelling as he ran into the hallway. Finally, he shouted, his voice cracking with relief. It is about time you got here. My sister is the one doing this. You need to arrest her. She is hacking the banks. He ran down the grand staircase, tying his robe, expecting to be greeted by officers ready to take his statement. Instead, he was met by the barrel of an assault rifle pointed directly at his chest. Get on the ground, the lead agent screamed. Hands behind your head, now. But I am the victim, Brent stammered, freezing halfway down the stairs. I am the CEO. Get on the ground, the agent repeated, not lowering his weapon. I watched my brother, the man who had strutted around parties, claiming he was a god among men, slowly sink to his knees on the cold marble. He was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. 2 agents moved in, zip, tying his hands behind his back with a professional efficiency that offered no comfort. Meanwhile, down the hall in the guest wing, a different drama was unfolding. My parents had been awake. I checked the camera feed in their room. My mother, Patricia, was not cowering in fear. She was in full panic mode. She was moving with a frantic energy I had never seen before. She was stuffing documents into her oversized Hermes Birkin bag. I zoomed in. I recognized the papers. They were the wire transfer confirmations for the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. They were the receipts for the houses they had put down payments on. And most damning of all, They were the printed emails between her and Jessica discussing how to hide the assets before the deal closed. She zipped the bag shut and threw a shawl over it. She grabbed my father's arm. "Marcus, say nothing," she hissed. "Do not say a word. Let the lawyers handle it." They opened the bedroom door just as agents were coming down the hall. My father put his hands up immediately, looking like a man who had accepted his fate. But my mother clutched that bag to her chest like it contained the crown jewels. "Ma'am, put the bag down," an agent ordered, stepping forward. My mother tried to summon her signature imperious tone. "This is my personal property. You have no right to touch my things. I am Patricia Jefferson. Do you know who we are?" The agent did not blink. "We know exactly who you are, Mrs. Jefferson. You are a suspect in a federal securities fraud investigation. Put the bag down, or you will be charged with obstruction of justice." She hesitated. For a moment I thought she was actually going to fight him. Her knuckles were white on the leather handles. She looked at the bag, then at the agent, then back at the bag. In that bag was the evidence of their greed. It was the proof that they knew exactly what they were doing. If she gave it up, it was over. She tried to pivot, maybe to run back into the room, maybe to throw the bag onto the balcony, but she was too slow. The agent grabbed the strap. My mother shrieked a high-pitched sound of pure indignation. "That is mine," she screamed, pulling back. "You cannot take our money. We earned it." It took two agents to pry her fingers off the handles. When they finally wrestled the bag away, she collapsed against the wall, sliding down until she hit the floor. She did not cry this time. She just stared at the bag as the agent opened it and began sifting through the incriminating documents right there in the hallway. "Well," the agent said, holding up the offshore bank statement, "it looks like we found the money trail." Downstairs, they were rounding everyone up in the living room. Brent, Jessica, and my parents were seated on the expensive white sofas, their hands zip-tied. Jessica was the only one who wasn't screaming. She sat perfectly still, her face pale, calculating the odds. She looked at the agents tearing apart the house. They were taking everything. Computers, phones, hard drives. They were even taking the paintings off the walls, checking for safes behind them. An agent walked up to the group. He was wearing a suit, clearly the one in charge. He looked at them with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Marcus Jefferson, Patricia Jefferson, Brent Jefferson, and Jessica Harrington," he announced. "You are all under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering." "But we did not do anything," my father whispered, his voice barely audible. "We just sold our company." "You sold a company you did not own," the agent corrected him. "And you accepted $4.2 billion for a product that did not exist. That is not business, Mr. Jefferson. That is theft." Brent looked up, tears streaming down his face. "It was Sophia. She turned it off. She tricked us." The agent knelt down so he was eye level with Brent. "We spoke to Omnicorp. We saw the contract. It was not a trick, son. It was a lease. You tried to sell a rental car to a dealership, and when you got caught, instead of returning the money, you tried to move it offshore. That is what brought us here, not the code, the cover-up." Jessica closed her eyes. She knew that the moment they tried to hide the money, they had crossed the line from civil liability to criminal intent. I sat in my chair miles away, feeling a strange hollowness in my chest. I had expected to feel triumphant. I had expected to cheer. But watching my mother sit on the floor in her silk pajamas, watching my father age 10 years in 10 minutes, watching my brother weep like a child, I just felt exhausted. They had done this to themselves. Every step of the way, they had chosen greed over family. They had chosen appearance over substance. And now the substance was coming to collect. The agents began hauling boxes of evidence out to the trucks. I saw them carry out Brent's laptop. I saw them carry out the safe from the study. I saw them carry out the very servers that were supposed to run the company, now just useless metal boxes without my code. My phone buzzed. It was a text from the Omnicorp CEO's assistant, Ms. Jefferson. "Mr. Sterling would like to know if you are available to speak." The board is convening an emergency meeting. We are prepared to make an offer for the IP. I looked at the text. Then I looked at the screen where my family was being led out of their front door in handcuffs. The paparazzi outside went wild flashes, popping like lightning. This was the picture that would be on every front page tomorrow. The fall of the House of Jefferson. I typed back a single word. Listening. I closed the camera feed. I did not need to watch them get into the police cars. I knew where they were going. They were going to a place where money could not buy better treatment, where their last name meant nothing, and where for the first time in their lives, they would have to answer for their actions without me there to bail them out. The investigation was just beginning. The agents would find everything. They would find the tax evasion. They would find the fake invoices. They would find the identity theft my mother committed to get the loan for Brent's car. It was all going to come out. It was a domino effect, and I had pushed the first piece. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was fully up now. It was a beautiful day, the kind of day where anything felt possible. For my family, it was the end of the world. But for me, for the first time in 29 years, it felt like the beginning. The Malibu mansion had transformed from a palace into a high-security prison. The ankle monitors strapped to their legs blinked with a menacing green light, a constant reminder that their freedom now extended only to the perimeter of the property line. The FBI had confiscated their passports and frozen their primary bank accounts, leaving them trapped in a house filled with expensive furniture, but devoid of any warmth. I watched them through the cameras, expecting to see them huddled together for comfort, planning their defense. Instead, I was witnessing a cage match. The stress of the indictment had stripped away the veneer of civility, revealing the rot beneath. It started in the kitchen. My father Marcus was pacing back and forth holding a glass of tap water because the delivery service for the imported spring water had canceled their account that morning. He stopped and looked at my mother Patricia, who was sitting at the island counter staring blankly at a wall. "This is your fault," Marcus said, his voice low and trembling with a rage I had never seen him direct at her. "You and your obsession with appearances. You and that damn Birkin bag." Patricia looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "Excuse me, I was trying to save our future. I was trying to protect the assets." "You were trying to protect your vanity," Marcus shouted, slamming the glass down so hard water splashed onto the marble. "You spoiled him, Patricia. You spent 30 years telling Brent he was a genius when he could barely tie his own shoes. You made him think he could run a tech company. You set him up to fail. Don't you dare blame me," Patricia shrieked, standing up. "I did what I had to do because you were too weak. You were always too soft on Sophia. If you had just been a man and forced her to sign the rights over years ago, we would not be in this mess. You let her walk all over us." I watched my father laugh, a bitter, hollow sound. "I let her walk all over us. I was the one who fired her. Remember? I did exactly what you told me to do. I signed the papers because you said Jessica had a plan." Speaking of Jessica, Brent stumbled into the room. He looked worse than he had during the raid. He had not showered, and he was wearing the same clothes he had been arrested in. He pointed a shaking finger at his wife, who was sitting in the breakfast nook furiously typing on a burner phone she had managed to hide from the agents. "She is the one," Brent yelled, his voice cracking. "She is the poisonous snake in this house." Jessica did not even look up. "Lower your voice, Brent. You are giving me a migraine. You ruined my life," Brent screamed, lunging toward her before stopping himself, leaning against the counter for support. "I was happy being rich and useless. I did not want to be a CEO. You pushed me. You told me I needed to be a titan. You told me to sell the company. You said Sophia was a nobody." Jessica finally looked up. Her eyes were cold, dead sharks swimming in blue water. "I told you to be a man, Brent. It is not my fault you are incapable of rising to the occasion. I gave you a roadmap to billions. All you had to do was not be an idiot for 24 hours. But you could not even do that. You practically confessed to Sterling on the phone." "I am going to tell them everything," Brent sobbed. "I am going to tell the prosecutor that you orchestrated the fraud. That you forged the due diligence reports. Jessica stood up slowly. Go ahead. Who do you think they will believe? The grieving wife who tried to stand by her incompetent husband, or the drunk CEO who signed every single fraudulent document? My name is not on the sale agreement, Brent. Yours is. The room fell into a terrified silence. They realized the truth of her words. Jessica had been careful. She had whispered in ears she had manipulated, but she had kept her fingerprints off the ink. She turned away from them and walked into the living room, dialing a number on her burner phone. I switched camera feeds to follow her. She was calling her father, the man she had bragged about, the man with the senators, on speed dial. Daddy, she whispered into the phone, her voice trembling, trying to summon the little girl charm that had always worked before. I need help. The bail hearing is tomorrow. They set it at 5 million. I need you to wire the funds. I could not hear the other side of the call, but I saw Jessica's face crumble. But Daddy, I am your daughter, she pleaded. You cannot leave me here. They are going to put me in a cell. She listened for another moment, and then the phone slipped from her hand and clattered onto the hardwood floor. She stood there frozen. Her father, the old money patriarch, had cut her loose. He was not going to risk his own reputation or his dwindling fortune to save a daughter caught in a federal securities fraud case. He had disowned her. She sank onto the sofa, pulling her knees to her chest. For the first time, Jessica looked small. She looked like exactly what she was, a grifter whose luck had finally run out. Back in the kitchen, the dynamic shifted again. The screaming stopped. A heavy, paranoid silence settled over the room. I zoomed in on the camera feed. I saw my father reach into his pocket and subtly adjust something. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and slid it back in microphone facing out. He was recording. He was recording his wife and son, hoping to catch them admitting guilt so he could cut a deal. Then I saw Patricia do the same thing. She moved her purse closer to Brent, her hand lingering on the clasp where she had hidden a small digital recorder. And Brent, poor stupid Brent, was holding his phone in his hand, the red light of the voice memo app clearly visible if anyone had bothered to look. They were no longer a family. They were 3 drowning rats in a bucket climbing over each other to reach the surface. They were preparing to betray each other to the federal prosecutors. They were building evidence against their own blood to save their own skin. I sat back in my chair, the tea in my mug gone cold. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt a rush of victory seeing them turn on each other. But instead, I just felt a profound sadness. This was the family I had spent my entire life trying to impress. These were the people I had wanted to love me. And now, seeing them for what they truly were, devoid of loyalty, devoid of love, devoid of honor, I realized I had never really lost anything. Because there had been nothing there to lose. I saved the video file of their argument. I named it evidence of coercion. It might come in handy for my own legal defense, or maybe just as a reminder of why I could never go back. My phone rang. It was the CEO of Omnicorp again. Ms. Jefferson. His voice was respectful, almost deferential. The board is ready? Name your price. I looked at the screen one last time. Jessica was crying on the sofa. Brent was drinking cooking wine from the pantry. My parents were recording each other's silence. I turned away from the monitors. 5 billion, I said into the phone. And one more condition. I want the rights to the family name. They can keep the house if they can pay for it. But the name Jefferson, it belongs to me now. I was done being the daughter. I was done being the sister. I was Sophia Jefferson, and I was the only one worthy of the name. The helicopter ride from the private pad in Oakland to the middle of the San Francisco Bay took only 15 minutes, but it felt like traveling between 2 different dimensions. Behind me, I left a city where news vans were still circling my brother's house like vultures, and where my parents were currently being processed in a federal holding cell. Ahead of me lay the open water and the Titan, a 300-foot superyacht that looked less like a boat and more like a floating sovereign state. I wore the same blazer and hoodie combination I had worn to meet Jessica. I did not dress up for Richard Sterling. I needed him to see me exactly as I was. A coder, an architect, the person who held the keys to his kingdom. When the helicopter touched down on the teak deck, a team of assistants was waiting to escort me, but Sterling waved them away. He stood alone by the railing looking out at the Golden Gate Bridge. He was a man known for his ruthlessness in business, but as I approached, he turned with a look of genuine appraisal. "Sophia," he said simply. He did not offer a handshake. He did not offer a fake apology. He just nodded at the empty chair across from him. "Thank you for coming." I sat down. The wind whipped my hair around my face, but I did not fix it. I just looked at him. "You look calmer than you sounded on the phone yesterday, Mr. Sterling." He chuckled, a dry sound that did not reach his eyes. "Yesterday I thought I had lost $4 billion. Today I realize I just tried to pay the wrong person. My engineers have spent the last 24 hours analyzing the encrypted shell of your kernel. They tell me it is not just code. They tell me it is art. They say it is 5 years ahead of anything we have in development." I nodded. 7 years, actually. I started writing the base layer when I was in grad school. Sterling poured 2 glasses of sparkling water. He pushed one toward me.